Hi, hello, what's up? Welcome to Tax Ladder. Today we're going to continue our series of revision lectures. We're going to cover registration, job work, TDS and TCS. It's going to be a wide range of topics today. Let us move forward quickly. My name is Shivakant and I'm a chartered accountant. First, registration. So who needs to register? Section 22 gives us that every person whose aggregate turnover in a financial year exceeds 20 lakh rupees and 10 lakhs for persons in special category states. So the turnover limit for me to find out whether I need to register myself or not is 20 lakh rupees. Goods trader or service provider, it does not matter. The first limit that I have to look at is it crossing 20 lakh rupees in this year? The moment it crosses 20 lakhs, I need to register myself. But if it is a special category state, the turnover is reduced to 10 lakh rupees. Why is this? Because the cost of living in special category states is lesser. The 10 lakhs over there is equal to 20 lakhs in a metropolitan city. Let us assume you get 10 rupees or let us say 40 rupees a plate of idli in Hyderabad or New Delhi. So the same would cost you 10 rupees only in special category state. So that means the cost of living over there is less, and 10 lakhs is a great measure of the 20 lakhs here. So that is why the limit is lesser there. So we need to remember what are the special category states. Alright, those declared by the constitution are different, and those for GST purposes are also different. The special category states as per the constitution are 11. What are these? Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. But for GST purposes, we only need to look at Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura. So let us look at the shortcut. Trinamool Congress, MAMI. Alright, Trinamool Congress, you remember, and MAMI. So if you remember this, these are the special category states we need to remember. Trinamool Congress, Tripura, Nagaland, Trina, Mool Congress, you remember, MAMI, Manipur, Mizoram. Alright, simple. Trina, MAMI. So if it is in the special category states, if the question says gives a mention of the special category state, just put 10 lakhs instead of 20 lakhs. Alright. Now, what are included in the aggregate turnover definition? It is given by section 2, clause 6. Inclusions are taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, interstate supplies of persons having the same PAN computed on a all India basis. Exclusions are CGST, SGST, UTGST, IGST. Compensations is value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge. So, to put it simple, all the taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, interstate supplies on a PAN India basis. What is my PAN number? So for that PAN number, what is the turnover? You file an income tax return, right? For your income tax return, all the branches all over the country are considered, and you file a consolidated tax return. What is that turnover I want? So I will determine whether you need to register or not depending on your turnover for the entire country on a PAN India basis, or not all India, PAN India basis. What is the turnover for you for this PAN number? Alright, based on that, in each state where you make a supply, if your turnover is exceeding 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, I have to register myself. So let us say overall in the country it is exceeding 20 lakh rupees. So even if there is a 50 rupee turnover in one state, 50 rupee supply from one state, I need to register myself there. Alright, a casual taxable person option is there, but that is for a different cause. But prima facie, I need to register even if there is a 1 rupee turnover that I make from that state. Alright. So that is what section 22 says. He need to register himself in each state from where he makes a taxable supply. In that state, in Arunachal Pradesh, if I make a supply, I need to register myself. Alright. Now, for the purpose of calculating threshold limit, turnover includes But what does turnover exclude? It excludes the CGST, SGST. Those are not considered for calculating aggregate turnover. Compensation says value of, see, some supplies the recipient is required to pay. If I pay tax on my inward supplies, I receive legal services from a service provider and I pay tax on it. So that is not considered as my turnover, even though if I pay tax on that, it is not considered as my turnover. Alright, finally, inclusions, taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports, interstate supplies on a pan-India basis, all over the country, for determining my eligibility for registration or not. For the purpose of calculating threshold limit, turnover includes supplies made by taxable person on his own account or made on behalf of all his principals. So if I make a supply for someone else as an agent, who is an agent? Any person who facilitates the supply of goods or services but does not make a supply on his own. So if I am a agent of, let us say I'm selling sunflower oil of a big brand, I am just selling it as an agent. So this oil that I am selling is still included in my turnover for determining whether I need to register myself or not. So this is also included in the aggregate turnover definition, only for calculating whether I need to get registered or not. The supply of goods after completion of job work from the premises of job worker shall be treated as supply of goods by principal and shall not be included in the aggregate turnover of the registered job worker. So who is a job worker? Any person who carries on any treatment or process on goods belonging to another registered person. So I carry on a paint job on cars belonging to Volkswagen company. So this job work, I am registered also. I am a painting, I have painting machines. I just spray paint on the cars and give it back to Volkswagen or sell it from my premises only. In this case, the sale of car from my own premises, will it be considered as my turnover or Volkswagen's turnover? It will be considered as Volkswagen's turnover. So it is not included in the aggregate turnover of the job worker when we are determining his eligibility for registration as per section 22. Alright. So now a person engaged exclusively in supply of goods and whose aggregate turnover does not exceed 40 lakhs is exempt from obtaining registration, subject to the following exceptions. So initially it was 20 lakh rupees, the threshold limit. It has been increased to 40 lakh rupees. So a person who is exclusively engaged in the trading of goods or in the supply of goods need not register himself if his turnover is exceeding 20 lakhs also, but to the limit of 40 lakhs. The cap for a person dealing exclusively in goods is 40 lakh rupees. So, but there are some exemptions also. Persons required to take registration compulsorily under 24. So, section 24 tells us people who need to mandatorily register themselves, like an e-commerce operator, like a TDS deductor, TCS collector. So these people, even though their turnover, maybe an e-commerce operator is exclusively dealing in supply of goods. Amazon, let us assume that Amazon is exclusively selling goods on its platform. It of course does sell goods only on Amazon. So will this 40 lakhs be applicable to Amazon? No. So this is not included for calculating that. So even though it is less than 40 lakhs, Amazon needs to register itself because it is covered under 24, which requires mandatory registration no matter what. Persons required to take compulsory registration, this 40 lakhs is not applicable. Persons engaged in supply of ice cream and other edible ice, whether or not containing cocoa, pan masala and tobacco and its substitutes. So a person engaged in sale of ice cream and edible ice, including tobacco and tobacco substitutes, if he is engaged in a supply of these products, he cannot opt for the 40 lakhs. Even though he is exclusively engaged in supply of ice cream or edible ice, he cannot opt for this 40 lakhs. Persons opting for voluntary registration or those who intend to continue their registration. So it's not that you have to mandatorily adhere to 40 lakhs, even though you are exclusively engaged in supply of goods. If you are voluntarily registered, even though your turnover is not crossing that, you can do that. You can continue your voluntary registration. It's not that you have to shut shop and discontinue or apply for cancellation of GST registration. So if you want to continue, you can continue. Why will the government lose revenue? So Telangana, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Puducherry and special category states of Tripura, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram have not opted to increase the threshold limit of 40 lakhs. Remember, so this option was given by the GST committee. GST council recommended the increase of to 40 lakh rupees, but the states also have to agree for giving effect of the SGST. But some states have not agreed to this. What are those states? So these states have not approved to the 40 lakhs limit. So if in the question, if these states are mentioned, you have to look at the old threshold limit, even though the supplier is exclusively engaged in supply of goods. So you have to remember these states. Let us look at a shortcut to remember these states. This we know, Trinamami. Alright. So for these states which have not allowed for this 40 crore turnover, we can remember them as Tere Mere, Telangana, Meghalaya, Cherry, Puducherry, or SIM card, Sikkim, remove KK, card, Khand, instead of Khand you put card, Uttarakhand, Tere Mere, SIM card or Cherry, Leke Chale, Chale means Arunachal Pradesh. Alright, the shortcut is Tere Mere, SIM card or Cherry, Leke Chale. Alright, this is something we can remember this as. So if these states are mentioned, it is not the 40 lakh turnover limit that is to be counted. It is the 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, whatever it is, and Trinamami also. Alright. In case of transfer of business as a going concern, including by way of death of sole proprietor, the transferee or successor is liable for registration from the date of such transfer of registration. So in case a sole proprietor is transferring his business, or he has died, unfortunately, so the person who is taking over the business, who is going concern, in the sense there should be continuity. A person who intends to continue the existing business has to compulsorily register himself from the date of such transfer or succession. So death, in case of death, it will be a transfer, or in case of succession in case of death, or a normal transfer. So in case of a business being transferred, so the other person also needs to register himself. So compulsory registration. When is compulsory registration mandated? It is given by section 24. Persons making interstate supplies, threshold limit of 20 lakhs is available in case of interstate supply of taxable services and specified handicrafts. So persons making interstate supplies have to compulsorily register themselves. So the exemption is given to, in case of, okay, even though if I make interstate supplies, I don't need to register myself. The threshold limit of 20 lakhs is applicable. In case of interstate supply of taxable services and specified handicraft goods. So the people who are engaged in supply of services, even though they are making, let us say a chartered accountant is making an interstate, I'm going for a bank audit there, I'm providing supply of services there in a branch, I don't need to register myself just because I'm making an interstate supply. The exemption has been given so long as my turnover limit is within 20 lakhs. Alright, and also if I am genuinely an intrastate supplier of goods who is engaged in supply of handicraft goods, handmade goods. So if I make interstate supply of these handicraft goods, a few of them, and my turnover is within the threshold limit, I don't need to register myself. So let us even consider all my supplies are interstate supplies only, but it is within the threshold limit of 20 lakhs. I don't need to register myself still. So if it is any kind of other goods that I am supplying interstate, I have to compulsorily register myself, even though my turnover is within 20 lakhs. Alright, the first thing is interstate supply, I have to register myself compulsorily. If it is supply of service, okay, look at the threshold limit of 20 lakhs. If it is supply of interstate supply of handicraft goods, also look at the threshold limit. Other than that, any kind of interstate supply, I need to compulsory register myself. An e-commerce operator, as we've discussed, is required to collect tax at source, and persons who supply goods or services other than those in respect of which the e-commerce operator has to pay tax himself. In case of hotels, accommodations, where the hotel guy is within the threshold limit, or through an e-commerce operator who is required to collect tax and source. However, the threshold limit is available in respect of supply of services through an e-commerce operator. All right, an e-commerce operator, this Amazon, this Go Ibibo, Flipkart, OLX, all of these people need to compulsorily register themselves. But is there, so what about the people who are selling on this e-commerce? They also need to compulsorily register themselves, except the supplier of services whose turnover is within the threshold limit. I am giving these small suppliers of services like people on urban clap, these electricians and all, they have to compulsorily register themselves. If this was not the case, who would register? So the exemption has been given to service providers who provide services through an e-commerce operator. All right. So even an e-commerce operator is not required to register himself compulsorily. Sorry, an e-commerce operator is compulsorily required to register itself, and persons who supply goods. So every person who is making a supply of goods through an e-commerce operator is straightforward blanket required to register himself. No exemptions whatsoever. For service providers, there is the 20 lakh threshold limit exemption, and also for people for services covered under 9 subsection 5, where the e-commerce operator himself is required to collect and pay the tax. In other cases, the e-commerce operator collects the tax and remits it to the service provider or supplier of goods, and that person pays the tax. The e-commerce operator only collects 1% or 2% of the tax as TCS. All right, e-commerce operator mandatorily required to register himself. So are the suppliers of goods through e-commerce operators compulsorily. Anyway, they will register because they need to take credit of the TCS that is being cut. And also, service providers are also required to register themselves normally, unless and until their threshold limit does not exceed 20 lakhs. If it is less than that, they don't need to register themselves. A casual taxable person, however, the threshold limit is available to him if he is making interstate supplies of notified handicraft goods and availing the benefits. So a casual taxable person is a person who occasionally carries out a supply of goods or services, supply of taxable supplies in a state. It is not, I just get one order in one state, so I just deliver it to that state. All right, or I purchase it from someone in there and sell it to that person in that state. So in this case, it is not my regular orders there. I'm just doing this occasionally, once in a lifetime or once in a year maybe. So I can register myself as a casual taxable person and pay the tax in advance. So we'll discuss the registration process later. So a casual taxable person needs to register himself. However, one thing is, if I'm making interstate supply of service, I can avail the threshold limit as we looked at in the first point. So I don't need to register myself as a casual taxable person, even though I'm providing supplies from that state occasionally. I can just show it as an interstate supply and close the deal. A person required to pay tax under reverse charge, he needs to mandatorily register himself. So let us say, let us take the example of a person who is purchasing this, what do you call this, cashew. On purchase of those goods, the recipient is required to pay tax. So in that case, even though the person who is purchasing it, his turnover is not exceeding 20 lakh rupees or 40 lakhs, whatever the case may be, he does not need to register himself normally. But for paying tax under reverse charge, he has to register himself and pay tax. He has to register himself only as a reverse charge RCM RCM recipient of service or goods, and he has to pay tax with that ID that he gets. So only for that purpose he has to register and pay tax. Non-resident taxable person. A non-resident taxable person, a person who is not resident in India but who occasionally carries out business in India. Just for one transaction, I just sell it here, but I don't have a normal place of business here. My place of business is in US, but one order, one sale I've made in India, and I go back. So this is he has to register himself as a non-resident taxable person, making taxable supply. Persons who are required to collect tax under 51. All right. Some people like Amazon, Flipkart need to collect tax. Even Swiggy collects tax on the people who use that platform. So persons who make taxable supply of goods or services or both on behalf of other taxable persons. So let us say a principal agent relationship. So I am selling the goods on behalf of another big brand. I am acting as an agent of that person. In this case, what happens? So even though my turnover is less than 20 lakh rupees, I have to register myself. Because that guy, the principal is a registered person. He's just supplying the goods to me and I am selling it again. So if I'm not registered, just imagine if I'm not registered, what will happen? So supply between principal and agent may or may not come under deemed supply under schedule 1 if there is no consideration. So what if this connection is lost? The track of the goods is not there. The audit trail will get missing. So that is why I mandate a person who is selling on behalf of someone else. I mandate the agent also to compulsorily register himself. So there's no getaway for him. We make taxable supply of goods on behalf of other taxable person, whether as an agent or otherwise, needs to compulsorily register himself. Input service distributor. So who is an input service distributor? A person who we've already discussed who an ISD is. So that guy has to compulsorily register himself. He has to obtain a separate registration as an ISD. A separate form has to be filed and a registration has to be obtained. Every person supplying OIDR service from a place outside India to a person who is unregistered. Okay, OIDR service providers, that is a different discussion altogether, but he provides service in an online mode without there's no physical connectivity really, literally. It just happens automatically. So let's say GoDaddy sells domains in India. It might not even have a place of business here. It just gives websites here. The payment is done online. Fund transfer is done online. There's no face-to-face contact. The customer care is also a US guy talks to us. If you really want to open a website on GoDaddy, you would understand. So this guy is an OIDR service provider. He does not even have a place of business in India. So if he is providing service of giving a website to a non-taxable person, a person who is not registered under the GST law, then that guy needs to register himself. The OIDR service provider needs to register himself. So if all of his clients are registered persons, then the registered person has to pay tax under RCM. But if he's making at least one supply to an unregistered person, that OIDR service provider needs to register himself. Alright, persons are required to pay tax under reverse charge. I think double times I've written this. So who are not required to register themselves? We've looked at section 22. What is the threshold limit for people to mandatorily register themselves? 24. We've looked at situations where a person has to mandatorily register himself. So now, what are the situations where I don't need to register myself? What are those situations? A person engaged exclusively in making supplies not liable to tax. So I'm completely, my turnover is 30 or 40 crore rupees, but I'm selling agricultural produce. I don't need to register at all. Or maybe 1000 crores. I don't need to register because I'm exclusively engaged in making supplies not liable to tax or which are wholly exempt from tax. An agriculturist engaged in supply of agricultural produce arising out of cultivation of land. So as I told before, so this example could be applied here also. So we could change the example to a person making supply of petrol. Even though he does not need to register himself, but the department insists on these petrol bunks at people and all to register themselves because they are selling lubricants and all. Even if they don't sell lubricants, the very HP dealer, for getting a dealership, they are asking for the GST number. So it has become inevitable. So this rule, even though it is there, is not mattering to some of the industries. So persons making supplies of taxable goods or services or both, the total tax on which persons making supplies of taxable, the total tax, okay. If my entire supplies, let us say I am a GTA operator, the person responsible to pay tax is the recipient. It is covered under reverse charge. So in this case, if the entire services by the GTA, the person liable to pay tax is that other person, then the GTA does not need to register itself. Alright. Normally, a person making interstate supplies is required to mandatorily register himself. However, exemption has been given to persons making interstate taxable supply of taxable services and notified handicrafts, notified products predominantly made by hand, where aggregate turnover does not exceed 20 lakhs on an all India basis. Look, as we've discussed before, interstate suppliers have to mandatorily register themselves under 24. However, the exemption has been given to which people? Notified people. These people are notified. A person making interstate supply of taxable services can avail the limit of 20 lakhs. Engaged in supply of notified goods. What are the goods notified? Notified handicrafts and notified products predominantly made by hand. So these cloth weavers and all, whatever they are making, they make it predominantly by hand. Even though a part of a machine is being used, if it is predominantly made by hand, that product, so that would be covered under the exemption. Even though it is interstate supply of goods, I can avail the threshold limit of 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs, whatever it is. A casual taxable person who is mandatorily required to register under 24 need not register in case of interstate supplies of. So for a casual taxable person also, the threshold limit has to be taken into account. In case of supply of notified handicrafts, notified goods predominantly made by hand, even though some machinery may be used in the process. Persons making taxable supply through e-commerce operators other than specified suppliers need not register if their aggregate turnover. As I told you, the suppliers of services can avail the threshold limit other than those under 9.5, because under 9.5, the e-com, those services, what are the services specified? Manpower services, housekeeping, and hotel accommodation. So those people, Ola, Uber, so those people, the person liable to pay tax is the e-commerce operator. So there's no point in keeping 9.5 services also here. That is why he excluded it from this. Persons, they need not register. The suppliers of services have been given the exemption of threshold limit. Now let us look at section 25. What is the, this is the process for registration. It is given by section 25. So what is the normal registration? A person required to register because his turnover crosses the threshold limit under 22, or a person who is to compulsorily required to register himself, he has to make an application within 30 days from the date of liability. Remember, within 30 days, let us say today on 1st May, my turnover crosses the 20 lakh mark. I am a service provider. So within 30 days, by 31st of May, I need to make an application for registration. Registration shall be effective from the date of liability. So if I make an application within 30 days from today, the date on which I am liable to be registered, then my registration would be effective from the day on which I am liable to be registered. So the 30 days for which I have not made an application also, the registration period would be effective. So I have to raise a revised invoice for this period for the supplies I have made. Anyway, that is a different discussion. So the registration I have to make within 30 days from becoming liable, and it would be effective if I make it within 30 days from the date on which the liability arises. Next, for a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person. So as we've discussed, these are people who occasionally carry on the business. They don't do it on a regular basis. Just for doing it, for executing a few orders in the state, I just go there and sell those goods or provide services. So in this case, they have to obtain a registration before the commencement of business there. So at least 5 days prior to the commencement of business, I have to apply for registration, and I have to make a deposit of the estimated amount of tax that I would be required to pay. Let us say I estimate that 5 lakhs of sales I make. So on that, let us say 5% is the tax. So 25,000 I have to deposit in advance before obtaining registration. So if, let us say, after the period for which, let us say, I take a registration for 1 month. So in the 1 month I make 10 lakhs worth of sales. So I have to pay the additional amount during that period when I make the sale, and my registration would automatically expire after a specified period. Or an extension of a further period of 90 days would also be granted by the commissioner on valid reasons being provided. But the registration purpose, I have to obtain it at least 5 days prior to commencement of business. Alright, if let us say a normal registration is not obtained within 30 days, the registration would be effective from which date? From the date of grant of registration certificate. Not even the date of making application, but it is the date of grant of registration certificate. Let us say 1 month later he gives me. So that day is the date on which my registration would be effective from. So this liability for the delayed registration, the officer would collect from us, even though if I have not collected from my customer. I cannot raise a revised invoice also in this case. So that is a penalty in a way. Specialized agencies like multilateral financial institutions and organizations notified under the UN Privileges and Immunities Act 1947. So what are these organizations? One of the entity notified under the UN Privileges and Immunities Act 1947 is one organization which you are hearing a lot, which is the World Health Organization. So that would be given a unique identity number. So let us say what happens is they receive supplies of goods or services, they pay the tax on their inward purchases or supplies, and they claim a refund from the government later. So this amount is being collected. Why don't they just exempt any sales to the UN service provider, UN? Because they want to have a track of who all are supplying goods to, because this could lead to a suppression of turnover. So these kind of entities need to obtain a UIN, or the government may suo moto grant a UIN. A person having UIN is not a registered person. Remember, the interesting fact is the UIN holder is not considered as a registered person. So the main advantage is all the liabilities that are there for a registered person are not applicable to a UIN holder. The proper officer, after filing an application or receiving a recommendation from MEA, can also be granted a UIN, assign a UIN within 3 days from the date of submission or application. So the proper officer, if an application is made by WHO itself, so he has to grant it within 3 days from the date of submission of application, or if the Ministry of External Affairs directs the proper officer to grant a UIN to a particular entity, so he has to do it within 3 working days. Alright. Suo moto registration. Sometimes the government feels that this guy, even though his turnover is crossing 80 lakh rupees, he is not registering himself. So it is a huge loss to the government. The government, if or the officer has reasons to believe, he identifies that, he can register a person suo moto. A temporary registration would be granted to him in pursuance to any survey, inspection, search, or any other proceeding. So it has to be in pursuance to any survey which has been conducted, inspection, search, or any other proceeding under the Act. If in respect of search, survey, proceedings under the Act, he finds out that a person needs to register himself, liable for registration, he passes an order temporarily registering that person. Within 90 days of grant of temporary registration, an application shall be made or an appeal shall be filed. If the appellate tribunal upholds the liability, the application shall be made within 30 days. Alright, so a temporary registration is granted to me. I am suppressing turnover. So that proper officer slapped a temporary registration order at me. So I have to make an application for registration. This is just a temporary registration. I have to actually make an application for registration within 90 days from the date of receipt of this order. 90 days of grant of temporary registration, application shall be made. Or if I don't agree with this order, I have to appeal to the GST appellate tribunal or the next appellate authority. So either of these things I have to do. Alright, okay, if I make an application to the appellate tribunal, the appellate tribunal upholds that, okay, this guy needs to register himself. Then within 30 days of the order of the appellate authority, I have to make an application. At least then I have to make an application. No further question should be asked. Alright, first he can temporarily grant a registration to me by slapping an order at me. So within 90 days I have to actually make a valid REG01 application, or I have to make an appeal. So if after I make an appeal, the appellate order is also against me, then within 30 days from that order by the appellate authority, I have to compulsorily register myself, or at least make an application within 30 days. Alright, so this is what the initial registration process is. See, separate registration shall be granted for each place of business within a state or union territory at the option of taxpayer, provided he shall pay tax on supplies made between the respective places of business. So let us say Reliance Industries has two businesses in one state. It has Reliance Infra. So it wants two registrations for one state in Mumbai. It can obtain it. Previously this was not the case, but now the relaxation has been given. Even though it is not a business vertical, previously only business verticals having different sets of business can opt for multiple registrations in a state. But now it has been, the option has been granted to anyone. Even I can take two registrations in the state of Telangana for my CA offices. Alright, the question was, why should I not take? Who are you to stop me from doing that? But the only condition you have to satisfy is you have to treat both the branches or registrations as distinct persons. Any supply between one branch to another should be treated as supply, even if made without consideration as per Schedule 1. Voluntary registration can be applied under 25(3). Even if my threshold limit is not crossing, I can also make a voluntary application, because many people are doing it. The tenders, government tenders ask for GST registration number. Otherwise, you are not even eligible for making an application. PAN is mandatory for grant of registration except for a non-resident taxable person. So for making an application for registration, PAN card is mandatory except for a non-resident taxable person, because he does not have a place of business here. In the application for an NRTP also, there is no need to quote a PAN. You can optionally quote a PAN number of the authorized signatory who could be a resident in India. So a person having a unit in a special economic zone or SEZ developer needs to obtain a separate registration different from registrations outside the SEZ within the same state or UT state, union territory, as a separate place of business. What does this mean? It means, let us say there are lots of special economic zones which are treated as outside the country to promote the exports. Main purpose of a SEZ unit is to improve the exports. So a unit in a special economic zone is required to obtain a separate registration even though it is in the same state as its main branch. The main branch of Reliance, or let us say Tata consultancy services, is in Bangalore. In a Bangalore special economic zone, IT special economic zone is also there. In that also Tata TCS establishes one unit. In that case, it has to TCS has to obtain two registrations, one for its head office and one for the unit in special economic zone. Alright, even though it is in the same state. Understand? So that is what this is. Obtain separate registration different from registrations outside the SEZ within the same state as a separate place of business. I have to show that as a separate place of business. ISD registration is also mandatory. It can be applied in REG 01 itself. Casual taxable person NRTP need to make an advance payment of estimated tax before registration is approved. A TRN is generated. Based on that, you have to make an advance deposit. In case of NRTP, it shall be accompanied by a self-attested copy of passport of authorized signatory who is a resident having valid PAN. In case of an entity incorporated outside India, the application shall be accompanied by its tax identification number in that country. So even though it is an NRTP application for registration, at least one authorized person should be there in India who has a valid PAN card. Even though he is not in India, he should be a person having a PAN card at least in India and having a valid passport. It is not necessary that the passport should be an Indian passport, but he should mandatorily have a PAN card. All right. In case of an entity incorporated outside India and established outside India, it should also submit the taxpayer identification. Just like a TAN number is given in India, US person must be giving, or we give a PAN card here, that US must be giving some identification number for taxation purposes. That needs to be quoted. Registration, okay, is valid for 90 days or date mentioned in the registration certificate, whichever is valid. So for a casual taxable person or an NRTP, the registration is valid for 90 days, 3 months it is valid. Or let us say I make an application only for 1 month, then 1 month is only the validity of the registration for a casual taxable person and NRTP. So could it be extended? Yes, it could be extended. A tax deductor would be granted registration within 3 days of submission. A TDS deductor, like government agencies and notified ministries or notified organizations of the Ministry of Defense, need to deduct tax at source. So within 3 days of making an application, the registration application should be granted, or some kind of issue should be pointed out. The proper officer cannot just ignore the application. Within 3 days, it is a very short period, because for government entities there is no real fuss. Now let us look at a detailed procedure. First, the GST REG 01 is our Bible. It has two parts, Part A and Part B. When making an application for GST registration online, Part A, Part B are there. So what we do first is Part A. I fill let us say I want to make an application. I enter my PAN number, I enter my mobile number and email ID. What happens is I enter submit. I get a password to my mobile number and email ID. I validate. So it is a verification of whether my mobile number and email ID are correct. Then when it is validated, a temporary reference number is generated, TRN. A casual taxable person uses TRN to make advance deposit. So a casual taxable person or NRTP has to pay tax at this time itself for getting his registration done. Now by quoting this TRN number, I can log in again and give a password. So then Part B opens. So now what I do, I submit Part B also. I ask for any clarifications or documents. So Part B contains much more detailed information, like what is my official registered address, what is my partnership deed, what is the company incorporation certificate, give MOA, AOA. So all of these are asked in Part B. Once I fill it and submit, the proper officer can ask for clarifications within 3 days. The applicant can reply within 7 days of receipt of notice. All right. So within 3 days of submission, grant a registration certificate in GST REG 06. Everything is in order. If it is not in our order, he has to issue a notice for asking clarifications or documents within 3 days. Otherwise, he has to grant registration within 3 days of making an application. The applicant is given more time to reply to the show cause notice. He is given 7 days time. So if I make a reply to the show cause notice within 7 days, if he is satisfied with the reply, if he is satisfied, then within 7 days he has to issue a GST registration certificate. The second time, the officer is given more time. If he is not satisfied, reject the application with reasons recorded in writing. If he is rejecting the application, he has to seriously give reasons in writing. Clear reasons have to be given. So let us summarize this up. So two parts. Part A, general information, mobile number, email ID. Part B, I just fill up the much more detailed information. So within 3 days, in either case, he has to approve it off. If he is within 3 days, he has to give reasons asking for more documents or either clarifications. That also, the show cause notice has to be issued within 3 days of submitting the application. Now, the applicant can reply within 7 days from the date of receiving the show cause notice. So, after replying, if the proper officer is satisfied, within 7 days he has to approve the registration and give a registration certificate in REG 06. If he is not satisfied, within 7 days he has to reject with giving clear written reasons why he is rejecting. Alright. Initially 3 days for replying to show cause and all, 7 days is given. Now what about an amendment to the registration? Amendment of registration under section 28. So as I told you, there are core fields and non-core fields. What are core fields? First look at non-core fields which can easily be changed. Non-core which are not really essential. I can just swap my mobile phone every day, right? So that cannot be made I can change my email ID also frequently. It should be my wish. So there's no real proper officer approval. So why would the proper officer ask for why are you changing your mobile number? It is my wish. Why are you changing email ID? It is my wish. So there has to be a simpler process for changing of mobile and email, which is actually very simple. You just enter the new mobile number and email ID, an OTP comes to that and it is automatically amended without approval from proper officer. So the core field amendments require proper officer approval. What are those? Trade name. I'm changing the name without change of PAN. Alright, I'm changing from, let us say, MS Raghavendra Enterprises to Raghavendra Steel Enterprises. So this is a trade name which requires approval, and I have to put a proof showing the, so I have to give a proof showing the new trade name. So that has to be attached. So this is a non-core field which requires approval. Principal place of business is being changed. So I have to attach the address proof of the new principal place, right? So that is a non-core field. Change in key. So the partnership deed, one partner is retiring. So that also needs to be a core field. I have to attach the new partnership deed, right? The managing director is changing. So that also needs some kind of proof needs to be attached of the PAN or Aadhaar of the changed director. So the application for amendment has to be made within 15 days of the change. So within 15 days of partnership deed change, I have to make an application. Otherwise, I would be subject to penalty. So the proper officer shall verify the application. Okay. Is he satisfied? Yes. He will amend the registration certificate. Now, what if he is not satisfied? He'll issue a show cause notice within 15 days, asking for a reply within 7 days. Alright, he'll issue a show cause notice within 15 days of receipt of application for amendment of core fields. After the show cause notice is issued, the reply has to be given within 7 days. If it is given and he is satisfied, he'll amend the registration certificate. If no reply is given, he'll not amend. But within 7 days, if no reply is given, he'll not amend. Okay, what if he is not satisfied with the reply within 7 days? The application is rejected with clear reasons given in writing. Cancellation of registration. I can do it voluntarily or as per the cancellation orders of the proper officer suo motu. So when can I cancel my registration? For these reasons I can cancel. Discontinuance of business. I am discontinuing my business. I don't want to carry it anymore because it is in total loss. So I can discontinue. Transfer of the entire business including by reason of death of the proprietor. So my entire business is being transferred to some other company, right? So my company no longer exists. So all the assets and all will be taken over. So this registration has to be cancelled now. Even if, let us say, I am a sole proprietor and I die. In this case, this existing business will no longer be there. This PAN will no longer be there. because it does not exist anymore. So the registration has to be cancelled. So you have to look at the PAN wise. Is the PAN existing or continuing? Is there a possibility of the business being continued in this PAN's name? What if there is a change of name? You have to cancel registration. You have to transfer the business to that PAN and cancel this registration. Because when the name changes, the PAN changes. Amalgamation, as I told you, because this entity no longer exists. In demerger, you have to look at the facts of the case, because one unit of this company is being transferred to the other company. So the company might exist or not, depending on the facts of the case. I have to obtain demerger. So let us say one branch is in Tamil Nadu, and that entire branch, I am selling it off. I would be having separate registration, right? So in that case, I have to obtain a cancellation of that registration, change in constitution of the business, which requires a change of PAN. If there is no change of PAN, so generally a constitution in business means I'm changing it from sole proprietor to partnership, or partnership to company, or company to private to public company. Generally private to public also, I think there's the same PAN is there. From company to a section 8 company, or society to company. So the constitution, the PAN is changing. That is the key here. You have to obtain for cancellation of the old one. Taxable person is no longer. Now this is the case where my turnover is reducing every year. It has come down below 20 lakhs. So I feel that I have to discontinue my registration. Even in that case, I can apply for cancellation. Suo motu cancellation by proper officer. When can he do it? If I contravene with the provision of the act, obviously. I have not filed returns for a continuous period of 6 months. 6 months continuously I have not filed. In case of a composition dealer, for 3 consecutive tax period I have not filed the returns. So he can suo motu give me a notice saying that why should I not cancel the registration. So before he cancels, he has to give me an opportunity of being heard. That is nothing but the show cause notice. Or if I've obtained the registration, he has reasons to believe that I've obtained registration by fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts. So you just have to buy hard these 3, yeah? Misstatement, willful misstatement, suppression of facts, fraud. Because everywhere it is there. Voluntary registered person has not commenced business. So this is also one more case where I've obtained voluntary registration at 25 subsection 3, and I have not commenced business within 6 months. So I have to obtain, so that proper officer can issue a show cause notice asking me to cancel my registration. So he'll say that why should I not cancel your registration? He does not conduct business from. So if I conduct as per the rules, it says that if I do not conduct my business, so I register my place of business at Karol Bagh in New Delhi, and I carry on my business in Tamil Nadu, or I carry on my business at Chor Bazaar. So that is not correct, right? So I have to either show it as my additional place of business and then carry on business there. If I'm doing business from a place where I have not specified, then he can, even in that case, issue a show cause notice asking me to cancel my registration. I issue an invoice without supplying the goods. So this is one of the fraudulent case. Unfairly giving credit to someone else. Now, the registration shall be deemed to have been suspended pending completion of proceedings for cancellation. Now, the registration would be said to be suspended from the date of. So people were facing a problem where I submit an application for cancellation voluntarily, and he takes at least 2 to 3 months to process the cancellation application. So for all those 3 months, I need to file GSTR 1 3B. So it was becoming a burden to those who have applied for cancellation. So that is why they've brought this, saying that the moment you apply for cancellation, your registration would be suspended, and you don't need to file GSTR 3B, and you just cannot make a supply of goods during the period of suspension. So it would be suspended from the date of submission of application, or the date of from which cancellation is sought, whichever is earlier. So it will be deemed to have been suspended from pending completion of proceedings. So if in the application I say that after 1 month or from 1 week later the cancellation should be effective. So from that date or from a prior period I make an application from a retrospective day. So from that date or date of submission of application, whichever is earlier, where cancellation is sought to be done by a proper officer after giving a personal opportunity of being in case of suo moto cancellation by the proper officer, he has to be given an opportunity of being heard before his registration is even suspended, because if he is voluntarily applying for cancellation, then it is fair enough that his registration is suspended. But if he is not voluntarily doing it and the proper officer is suo moto making a cancellation notice, then it would be a burden to him if his registration is cancelled abruptly or even suspended for that matter. So he has to be given an opportunity of being heard before even the suspension. The person whose registration has been suspended shall not make a taxable supply during the period of suspension, shall not be required to furnish returns under section 39. That means he need not furnish GSTR 3B during the period of suspension also. Suspension shall be deemed to be revoked upon completion of cancellation of proceedings by proper officer. So once the proceedings have been completed, once the cancellation has been complete, the suspension of registration is said to be cancelled. So if in case of suo moto cancellation by the proper officer, if after your reply or after the proceedings are finished, it is found that you have actually complied with the provisions of the law and your registration is not liable to be cancelled, then the suspension is said to be revoked and you can file your returns normally. Now let us look at the cancellation process. Voluntarily cancellation. I have to make an application within 30 days from the event, whatever the event is, discontinuance of business, change of constitution. Within 30 days, I have to make an application in REG 16. If the proper officer is satisfied, then within 30 days of the application, he will issue a cancellation order and it is final, your registration is said to be cancelled. Now, in case of suo moto cancellation, he will issue a show cause notice to the person concerned. I will reply to the show cause notice within 7 days of the issue of show cause notice. If the reply is not satisfactory, then he will issue within 30 days of reply to the show cause notice, issue a cancellation order. So it is made for the convenience of the proper officer. We are giving 30 days, but the reply to the show cause notice has to be given by the person within 7 days. Now, one important thing that the person needs to do before cancelling, one thing he has to do is he has to reverse the ITC on stock of inputs lying in hand, stock of finished goods lying in hand, and stock of semi-finished goods lying in hand. So why does he need to do this? Because he is no longer going to pay output tax now, so that he will not be using the input tax for payment of output tax. So unnecessarily the government is losing revenue. So the goods have been purchased and not sold. Tax has not come to the government yet. So on that, pay me tax, the government says. Normally, if he would have made an outward supply to the final consumer, the tax would have reached the government because it is the ultimate sale. The tax would have reached the government. But now the sale is stopping and no final sale to the consumer has happened. So pay tax on the stock that is in your hand, be it inputs in respect of finished goods or inputs in respect of semi-finished goods lying in hand. Find out the tax payable. What is the tax payable? It is the tax in respect of identify, let us say 50,000 value of stock is in hand. Find out the invoices pertaining to the inputs and based on that calculate the tax payable. If it is not possible, then take the transaction value, tax payable on the transaction value. If it is sold now, what would I get? On that, what is the tax payable? Whichever is higher, you pay that. So ITC on inputs lying in stock, finished goods and semi-finished. So ultimately, let us summarize this. So voluntarily cancellation, within 30 days of the event, I make an application. Within 30 days, he has to give a cancellation order. So what if suo moto cancellation by the officer? He has to issue a show cause notice to me. Within 7 days of the issue of show cause notice, I have to give a reply. Within 30 days of the reply to the show cause notice, I have to issue a cancellation order. cancellation order. All right. So the ITC on stock should be reversed, or if it is not possible, the normal rule is the ITC on the stock in hand or the transaction value, whichever is higher, should be reversed. It is as if I am selling it now. All right. Other points in respect of capital goods, the ITC availed. So the capital goods are in hand. Let us say I'm using some machinery. So the machinery, I'm closing down the business and applying for cancellation. On machinery, if I've availed credit, then consider the useful life as 5 years and reverse the ITC. If there is no stock in hand, no problem, don't need to pay any tax. UN holder, because he is not even a registered person, he cannot apply for cancellation. Only registered persons, if you are first registered, then you can apply for cancellation. You are not even a registered person, the UN holder, you cannot apply for cancellation. Cancellation will not affect the liability of a person to pay tax and other dues under the Act prior to the date of cancellation. So cancellation, so let us say today I am applying for cancellation from this day, effective from this day. So what happens? My cancellation will be effective from the date of application if I make it an application within 30 days. But what if I have 5 crores of GST payable by me for the last 3 months? So that liability will not be dissolved. That liability will still continue even though my registration has been cancelled. Alright, that liability will still be continued. It will not affect my liability. Returns for a period prior to cancellation. See, the registration will be suspended, right? So once after cancellation of registration, the cancellation certificate I get, I can file previous returns even after cancellation order, which are still due. It's not that cancellation is over and everything is done. You have to file all the previous year's returns, which you have not filed. Only then you can file a final return in GSTR 10. Now revocation of cancellation. Now the cancellation has been done suo motu by the proper officer. I want to revoke the cancellation. Now what is it has to be applied within 30 days of service of order of cancellation. Within 30 days I have to make an application, otherwise I cannot. He can accept the application or reject within 30 days of receipt of application. So he'll look at the reasons for revocation. I really want to continue my business. That could be my reason. I'll file my returns. If I have not filed returns for a continuous period of 6 months, he can make a suo motu cancellation. So what I say is, all right, I want to continue my business. So in this case, for non-filing of returns, what I need to do, I have to file the returns before making a application for revocation of cancellation. Then there is no option for him left. He has to revoke the cancellation. Within 30 days of receipt of application, he has to revoke the cancellation. He cannot reject without issue of show cause notice, and the application shall reply within 7 days. Thereafter, the proper officer can dispose of the application within 30 days of receipt of application. Now, he has to first issue a show cause notice to me if he has any queries. He cannot just reject the revocation application. I will reply to the show cause notice within 7 days. Within 30 days of receipt of reply to the show cause notice, he can dispose of the application for revocation. Alright, note on returns to be filed before cancellation. See, that's what, as I told you before, I can file the returns for the period before the cancellation is effective. Let us say in the month of May, on May 1st, I made an effective cancellation. So for April, March, even though my registration cancellation has been approved, I have to file returns and I can. Now let us look at what is job work. Let us look at job work. What is job work? Job work is any treatment or process carried on goods belonging to someone else. Let us say this guy is the principal. He sends his Volkswagen car, this guy's Volkswagen, he sends it to Asian Paints to do a paint job. It sprays paint on the car and makes it colorful and sends back the car to Volkswagen. Now what is the process? That is what we want. Now what is the tax liability? What is the documentation procedure? See, simple. So this Asian Paints is carrying on the paint job on goods belonging to another registered person. So if Volkswagen is not registered, then this is not a job work. Alright, the definition itself says it is a treatment or process carried on goods belonging to some other registered person. Alright, this is one condition that needs to be satisfied. So what is the process now? We know what a job work is. Now the process is, if Volkswagen sends goods to Asian Paints, it has to send it under the cover of a delivery challan. Now normally sending goods might amount to sale because some consideration is involved, right? Principal is sending goods to carry on some process, and for that this guy receives consideration. Normally in a sale, if this is a sale, he would receive consideration, right? So this is not a sale. Now let us look at a situation where this guy Volkswagen sends cars to Asian Paints for carrying on a paint job. The process should be, it has to be accompanied by a delivery challan. It has to be under the cover of a delivery challan. Otherwise, they'll be stopped in transit asking that where is the delivery challan, where is the invoice? Because there is no supply happening, it has to be under the cover of a delivery challan. Anything which is not a supply, which is being transported, there has to be a delivery challan. Similarly, a job worker, if he is receiving goods or a principal is sending goods to a job worker, it has to be under the cover of a delivery challan. But before sending, I have to intimate the jurisdictional officer saying that I am sending goods job work, this is the description of the goods, this is the process being carried out, this is the paint job being carried out. So that needs to be intimated to the jurisdictional officer of the principal and job worker before the goods are even sent. Understand? Now what is the tax treatment now? Who needs to pay tax? Alright, who needs to pay tax? Now there are situations where the paint is over and the car is ready for sale. In this case, the Volkswagen sells it from the job worker's premises only to its customers. Now whose turnover is this? It has to be treated as turnover of the principal and not the turnover of the job worker. Alright, it is included in the aggregate turnover of principal and not the aggregate turnover of job worker for calculating threshold limit. But for this to be satisfied, some conditions are there. The principal has to show the job worker's premises as his additional place of business if he is not registered. So if Asian Paints, let us say, is not registered, the principal has to show this job worker's place as his additional place of business in his GST portal. He has to log in and add the job worker's place as the additional place of business. Now what if the job worker is registered? Asian Paints is registered. Even then it is treated as supply in the hands of principal only. The job worker sends it to another job worker. So any transport of goods without it being a supply should be accompanied by a delivery challan again. Alright, so he sends it under the cover. So this guy principal sends it in triplicate. 3 delivery challans are sent. Alright, so this delivery challan is sent. So 2 delivery challans are given to the job worker and 1 he keeps it with himself. Out of this 2, 1 he keeps it with himself. Once the job work is finished, he sends 1 delivery challan back to the principal after putting his stamp or some kind of identification. So the 3 triplicate is taken care of. So 1 he keeps it with himself initially, 2 he sends it to the job worker. After completion of job work, the job worker returns the goods, right? At the time of return, along with the documents, he gives back 1 of the delivery challan after putting his stamp. 1 delivery challan he keeps it with himself. So ultimately he would be having 2 delivery challans, 1 stamped by the job worker and 1 the initial one. Now what if the job worker sends it to another job worker? So he can either endorse the original delivery challan he has in the name of the second job worker, or he can issue a new delivery challan. That is his option. Alright. Now what if it is sold to the recipient at the premises of job worker himself? Now who needs to pay tax? Who needs to raise an invoice? Alright, the invoice will anyway be raised by the principal himself to the recipient. If he is unregistered, the job worker, the principal has to show it as his additional place of business. Otherwise, he cannot sell it from the job worker's premises. Why is it? Because I want an audit trail there. If he is not registered, I can sell it to anyone else. I'll say that I'm sending it for job work, first thing, and I'll not return the goods for 1 year. But I'll sell it off. Here, what I'm doing is I'm avoiding tax. So, in order to prevent that, if he is unregistered, I have to show this as my additional place of business. Alright. In order to avoid bogus sales, I have to show this as my additional place of business. So, that is the case. If the job worker is registered, I'll be anyway having audit trail because he'll be raising a job work invoice and it will be under record. Anyway, the principal has to file a quarterly ITC 04 giving details of goods sent to job worker, details of all delivery challan. Even the GSTR 1 has an option to enter delivery challan details, which many of us do not do. Now, let us look at a few more points. We know the definition of job work treatment or process carried on goods belonging to another registered person. 2 clause 68. Non-returning within a specified period would make it a deemed supply on the day on which the inputs were sent to the job worker, and principal would be liable to pay tax along with interest. See, one more condition is the principal, if he sends goods inputs to the job worker, it has to be returned within 1 year from the date of delivery. Otherwise, now who would take input on the goods received by the principal? The principal can take inputs and not the job worker. So, if he does not return the goods within 1 year, the principal has to reverse the credit taken on the inputs. So that, because to have a track of that also, all of this information is being asked. In case of capital goods sent to a job worker, it has to be returned within 3 years. Otherwise, the principal has to reverse the credit he takes on the capital goods. Now, one thing, if you remember, the credit can be taken only on the physical receipt of the goods. But in this case, sometimes what happens, one of the conditions under section 16 is he has to have physical delivery of goods. But here, the goods are directly sent to the job worker, inputs are directly sent to the job worker sometimes for processing without being received at the principal place of business. So, there is an exemption given which says that even if the principal does not receive goods, inputs or capital goods at his place of business, he can still take input credit. That is one of the exceptions given. The time period can be extended by a further period of 1 year or 2 years in case of inputs and capital goods by commissioner on sufficient cause being shown. So, as I told you, it has to be returned within 1 year or 3 years. The commissioner, on a request made to him on sufficient cause being shown, he can extend the period of 1 year or 3 years by another 1 year or 2 years. So, this 1 year can be increased to 2 years and 3 years to 4 years on permission by the commissioner. So, this molds, jigs, fixtures, if they are sent to the job worker, this time limit for input credit is not applicable. The entire responsibility is on the principal because he is the big player. So, mostly job workers are small players, they are unorganized. So, the onus of paying tax, the documentation, the turnover is put in the principal's hands. The compliances are put in the principal's hands. Registration requirements for job worker when located in a state different from the principal depends on his aggregate turnover. Now, does a job worker compulsorily need to register himself? So, the registration requirements for a job worker when located in a state. So, let us take a situation where the job worker is in Tamil Nadu and the principal is in Kolkata. So, job worker is supplying service to principal, right? This is an interstate supply of service. Now, this is an interstate, if he is registered, assume, is an interstate supply of service, even though he does not cross the threshold limit, he has to register himself. But if you remember, for service providers also, even though they are making interstate supply of services, they can avail the threshold limit of 20 lakhs. So in that case, this would go away. All right. Registration requirements when located in a state different from principal depends on his aggregate turnover. That's what I meant. So this is what principal and job worker is. Let's look at section 49, 50, 51 and 52. 4 things left. 49 gives us what is the mode of payment of tax, what are the ledgers available to us, and section 50 tells us what is the interest leviable in case of tax which remains unpaid, or interest leviable in case of undue claim of input credit. Alright, section 51 gives us TDS, section 52 tells us about TCS. So let us look at 49. There are 3 electronic credit ledger, electronic ledgers. One is electronic cash ledger, 2 electronic credit ledger, and 3 electronic liability ledger. This is just like an accounting ledger. There is a debit, there is a credit. If in one account there is a debit, in another account there has to be a credit. Simple accounting rules follow for these also. So now the 3 electronic ledgers are maintained in the GST common portal. The electronic cash ledger, electronic credit ledger, liability ledger. Payments can be made through. So just like how do I recharge a Paytm? When I make a payment, it gets credited into my wallet, right? It is there, but it is not utilized. That is what electronic cash ledger is. Electronic cash ledger always has credit balance. Your Paytm ledger balance has credit balance always, if there is cash. Otherwise, if there is liability, there will be debit balance. Same logic goes. Your bank account has credit balance if it has cash balance. Otherwise, it has debit balance. Simple logic. So how do I make payment? What is the process? So what I do is I log on to the portal. I can make payment through net banking from any of the authorized banks or NEFT or RTGS. A mandate form is generated. So debit or credit cards of any bank, over the counter payment. So I can also deposit tax in cash subject to a limit of 10,000 over the counter per period. Alright, in authorized banks. So the modes are net banking is available for authorized banks, RTGS, NEFT for any bank, and a mandate form is generated. That form has to be submitted to the bank again. Debit and credit cards, over the counter payments. So once I make a payment, a CPIN is generated, common portal identification number is generated, which is a 14-digit number. Alright, it is valid for 15 days. 15 days from which day? 15 days from the date of generation of challan. So after that, it will disappear from the portal. So you have to make the payment within 15 days. So first generate the challan, and then payment can be made through any of the modes. So once the challan is generated, a CPIN number is generated. Once the payment is made, the CPIN number is converted into a challan identification number. Alright, it is an 18-digit code, which is nothing but the 14-digit CPIN code plus the bank identification number. Once the payment has been debited from the bank account of the taxpayer, but no SIN has been generated, he can make an application to the GST portal to resolve the issue. There is a separate form there. If a CIN number is not, challan identification number is not generated, I can make an application to the GST portal asking, giving my queries, saying that it has been debited and but it is not reflected in the cash ledger. So the query can be raised and it will be resolved by GST. Date of deposit is the date on which it is credited into the account of the government. So what is electronic credit ledger? What is electronic cash ledger? And what is liability ledger? We'll discuss quickly. What can be credited into the electronic cash ledger? What I deposit through NEFT or whatever mode of payment, it will be credited to the electronic cash ledger. So amount of tax, interest, penalty, fee deposited through challan will be credited to the electronic cash ledger, right? Simple. So tax interest, penalty, fee will have separate heads. Now TDS, now once a person deducts TDS for me, let us say I am a supplier and that other person deducts TDS and pays me the rest of the amount. So he files his TDS return, and it will be, once I accept the TDS return that he files, it will be credited to my electronic cash ledger. So that is one more thing that will be credited to the electronic cash ledger. Now let us say I apply for a refund of the electronic cash ledger. I unfortunately deposited excess amount in the cash ledger. Instead of depositing 50,000, I unnecessarily deposited, my accountant deposited 1 lakh. So when I make an application for refund, what happens is, the moment I submit RFD1, the electronic cash ledger is debited by the amount of refund application. Because if it is not debited, I can make 2 refund applications. So the amount to the extent of which I make an application will be debited automatically. Just a prevention measure. So if the refund is rejected again, it has to be credited, right? So that is what this is. Refund rejected by the appellate authority or on a declaration made by taxpayer that no further appeal would be made. Understand? Now what will be debited? Just imagine, when I make payment of tax, it has to be debited, right? Amount claimed as refund will be debited, obviously. So as I told you, once I claim a refund, it will be debited. Payment made for tax interest will be debited. Tax payable and reverse charge. Remember, reverse charge tax can be paid only through cash, because it is clearly said under section 14A. It can be paid only through cash. Tax payable as TDS or TCS collected from another person. See, we are not looking at it from a supplier point of view. Now I am a government entity. When I make payment to my supplier, which I receive inward supplies, I deduct tax and pay. So for payment of this TDS, I have to pay it in cash only. There is no other option. I cannot use my input rate. So for reverse charge and TDS, TCS payments, I cannot use the electronic credit ledger. Tax payable under section 10 as a composition dealer. So a composition dealer has to pay tax only through electronic cash ledger. You cannot use input credit. That is one of the basic conditions. So that will be debited to the electronic cash ledger. You will not find this in the electronic credit ledger. So now credit ledger. What can be credited to this? Simple amount, whatever I return I file, that is the credit I take, right? The 3B that is filed will be shown in the credit of electronic credit ledger. The ITC that I claim in 3B will be shown here. Now similarly, refund of ITC, be it zero rated supplies or refund as per inverted duty structure, the moment I make a refund application, it will be debited. But if the refund is rejected, it is again credited, or if an appeal is made and the appellate authority also rejects my refund application, then it will be credited again. Now what will be debited? Any utilization, payment of tax, see, remember, interest, only tax can be paid through ITC. Interest, late fee, there will not be any input trade balance. You cannot use that also. So in the debit side, only tax would be there. Payment of output tax only and not other dues. Other dues means interest, penalty, late fee. Those cannot be paid through credit ledger. Amount claimed as refund will automatically be debited. Electronic liability ledger. So liability ledger is nothing but a reverse of all of this. See, what the cash account will have a credit balance, right? My liability should have a debit balance. What will be my liability? In the returns 3B that I file, what is the turnover that I show? That will be debited. Payment of output tax. No, this is credit ledger. So what will be debited? All the liabilities assessed as payable by the periodical returns filed. Amount it now, the proper officer himself determines that something is payable by me and he issues a notice. The moment he issues an online notice, it will be reflected in the electronic liability ledger debit. Pursuance of proceedings under the act ascertained by the person. Maybe 73-74 notice has been made a demand order. Interest accrued will also be shown here. What will be credited? Payments made. So the moment I make a payment, it will be created. A UIN, so every payment will be given a unique identification number relating to discharge of liability will be indicated in the corresponding entry in the ledger. Now let us look at so these are the three ledgers, very simple accounting, basic accounting it is. The one thing you have to remember is you cannot discharge RCM liability through the electronic credit ledger. It has to be only through electronic cash ledger. So is TDS and TCS. Now order of discharge of liabilities. Now I have last month's dues pending. I have current month's dues pending. I also have next. I also have any demand notice issued to me. So three types of payments are paying. What should I pay first? First, I have to pay last period's dues which are outstanding. Then I have to pay current period's dues. Next, I need to pay any demands. So that is the order that I have to follow. See, self-assessed tax and other dues relating to previous tax periods. Self-assessed tax and other dues relating to current tax period. Any other amount payable under this act or rules made thereunder, including demand determined under 73 and 74. Alright, this is the order that has to be followed while making payments. Now interest, simple, interest a flat rate of 18% per annum would be applicable in case of liabilities which I actually need to pay. I accept it, but I delay it. So 18% interest needs to be paid to the government. One. Now, when is 24% interest required to be paid? In case of undue or excess claim of input credit under subsection 10 of 42, undue excess reduction in output. So, in case of tax mismatch, there needs to be certain items reversed. Alright, let us say 2A, some invoices are not being shown. So, the corresponding credit needs to be reversed. Previously GSTR 3 and all were there. Based on that, these rules were framed. But now you have to remember, see, everyone is saying any ITC which you have claimed unnecessarily, you have to pay interest at the rate 24%. That is not correct. Only in respect of these sections, that is reversal under subsection 10 of 42 and 4310 only, 24% interest will be applicable. Otherwise, 18% in respect of reversal of ITC also. Do not be harsh on your clients. Look at what subsection 10 of 42 is. Only for those specific cases, if it is falling under, you charge 24% interest. Otherwise, 18% only. Now, let us look at section 51, TDS. What is TDS? As I told you, let us say notified persons like the central government, state government or any department, if let us say I supply some kind of service to the central government department or a public sector undertaking, NMDC. NMDC, while making a payment to me, if my invoice value, the contract value is more than 2,50,000. He says contract value. It does not specify a period. The contract may be for 5 years and it is 3 lakh rupees. It does not matter. It is getting covered if the contract value exceeds 2,50,000. It does not specify it per year or anything. The contract value, no matter for 50 years it is, if it exceeds 2,50,000, TDS is applicable. So the following persons are required to deduct tax at the rate. So he'll deduct 1% CGST, 1% SGST. So overall 2% on the payments made to me. Let us say for April month he'll release payments in May, right? So this May month payments, while he's making payment to me, he'll deduct 2% tax and pay the rest to me. I'll take credit of that in my electronic cash ledger, as we've discussed before, and use it for payment of my tax. But who are the parties that need to deduct tax? The central government, state government or any of its department, local authority, GHMC, governmental agencies or the Bombay Municipal Corporation, I guess. Notified institutions. What are notified institutions? Any authority or board established by an act of parliament or set up by the government. For both these conditions, the government should have 51% or more participation by way of equity or control to carry out any function. So any public sector undertaking like NMDC or any society which the government has established will be coming under the TDS coverage. All right. Now, hope you understood this. Now, no deduction. For whom does the government need not deduct? In case of supply from one PSU to another. So these persons, if there is an inter supply between the notified persons, no need to deduct. If one PSU is making a supply to another PSU, no need to deduct tax. Where location of supplier and place of supply are in a state different from the location of recipient. See, let us say there is CGST and SGST charged in my bill. He'll deduct 1% CGST and 1% SGST. Fair enough, fair enough. In Telangana, because both are in the same state, it is okay. Now let us look at a case where location of supplier and place of supply are in a state different from, somehow I am in the state of Telangana, that guy is in the state of Maharashtra, and the place of supply is also falling in Telangana. In this case, supplier is in Telangana, place of supply is in Telangana, CGST and Telangana GST will be raised in the bill. Alright, so that guy would deduct, what will he deduct? He will deduct the tax at the rate 2% and he'll pay 1% to the Maharashtra government. So I cannot take credit of that. So this is not a possibility, that is, so this is not possible. So in that case, no deduction is required. Where the location of supplier and place of supply are in one state, Telangana, and the location of recipient is in another state, no TDS is required to be deducted. So that is also one thing you need to keep in mind. If look at the location of supplier, place of supply, if it is one state, place or location of recipient is in another state, no TDS required. Amount to be deposited, so last month's payment he is making me in this month. He deducts tax at the rate 2% at the time of payment. He has to file his TDS return by 10th of next month. Alright, 10th of next month he has to deposit. He has to give me a certificate within 5 days of deduction. That means within 5 days, this is May, so by 10th of June he has to file. Within 5 days of 10th of June, which is 15th of June, he has to give me a TDS certificate saying that he has deducted tax. Otherwise, he would be subject to a late fee of 100 per day, subject to maximum of 5,000. So he makes a delay of 5 days, so he is subject to 500 rupees of late fee. Non-remittance would attract interest at the rate under section 50, which is 18%, as we have discussed. Now, e-commerce operator. Amazon needs to collect tax, is required to collect tax at the rate 1% net value of taxable supplies made through it, where consideration is to be collected by the operator. Now remember, let us say Amazon, a lot of goods are sold on Amazon, right? Now for every sale, let us say 1000 worth goods are being sold on Amazon, and 2% of that, which is 20 rupees, would be collected by Amazon and paid to the government. Let us say 1000 rupees is sold, 500 rupees is returned in the month of May. So what is the net taxable supplies that I make? 500 only, 1000 minus returns, which is 500. So on the net taxable supplies during the month only, he would deduct tax at the rate 1% and remit it to the government. He will file a return by 10th of next month, giving details of what are all the supplies on which I have collected tax and paid to the government. Remit 10th of succeeding month. Net value of supplies is the aggregate value of taxable supplies during the month reduced by the aggregate value of taxable supplies returned. Fair enough. Any authority not below the rank of, so listen carefully, the government can snoop on the suppliers. If it feels that the suppliers are showing less turnover, it can give a notice to the e-commerce operator saying that give details of what are all the supplies that Shivkant has made on Amazon. So e-commerce operator, the Amazon is bound to give details to the commissioner. So the authority is deputy commissioner. No person below the rank of deputy commissioner can issue notice to Amazon asking for my details. If he does, Amazon should not adhere to it. If an assistant commissioner asks, then Amazon should not give details. Only a deputy commissioner or joint additional commissioner asks, then Amazon has to give. So it has to give details within 15 days of service of notice. It can also give details of the stock of mine held in its warehouse. All right. So everything is transparent now. This is put in the law itself. So this concludes our discussion of job work, TDS, TCS, interest and registration.